If your dream still matters, but it seems like your actual life has no time for it, this episode is for you. Because today we're going to stop treating your creative life like something that has to survive on scraps. And we're not going to do it by having a full life overhaul or some kind of fake hustle. We're not going to pretend that there's some magical secret version of you that can get up every day at 4:30 a.m. with unlimited time, unlimited energy, and never has a bad Monday. No, today we're going to go simpler than that. We're going to find one protected place where your dream can begin to live again. Because maybe your dream isn't weak. Maybe you're not lazy. Maybe this isn't about dedication. Maybe the thing that still matters has just been trying to survive on whatever's left after the rest of your life is done devouring your time. And dreams can't survive forever on leftovers. You know that feeling when you finally admit that the dream still matters and you still want it? And for a moment, that feels good. I mean, really good. The thread is still there, that little pull in your chest is there, and maybe for a second you think, okay, maybe I'm not done. Let's do this thing. But then you look at your actual life, your calendar, your energy, your responsibilities. What's honestly left of you by 9 p.m. on a Thursday after taking care of everything else. And you realize that there's no space for the dream to live. Not a protected place, not a steady place, not a place that says, this matters to me. Just the fringe edges, the maybe someday spaces. After work, after everyone else gets what they need, after the errands, the emails, the meetings, and the day has already used up the best parts of you. And then you wonder why the dream feels weak, why it keeps going quiet, why it feels so far away. But maybe the problem isn't that your dream is too fragile. Maybe the problem is that it's been surviving on the leftover scraps of your life. And if your creative life only gets your leftovers, sooner or later it starts to feel optional. Howdy, worthy creative. Join me for a cup, a full one this time, because last time we talked about the voice that says you're too late. And we named something important. Late is not the same as done. Your dream may not have arrived on the schedule that you imagined, but that doesn't mean that it expired. But now comes the next honest question. If the dream isn't dead, if the thread is still there, if something in you still reaches toward that work, then where does that dream actually live? Not emotionally, not in the beautiful part of your heart where everything matters and will somehow magically happen. I mean practically. Where does it live on your calendar? Where does it live when life starts taking things from you? Because a dream can survive being quiet for a while. It can survive delay, but it can't survive forever on leftovers. There's a painful pattern that I see in creative people. And I know it way too well because I've lived it. And from what I've seen, there's a lot of us going through this. We say that something matters to us, and we mean it. We feel it. We know that creative life isn't just some silly little hobby hiding in the corner wearing a party hat. It's a part of who we are, how we process, how we connect and contribute. And yet when we look at the actual structure of our lives, what we say matters most often gets what's left after everything else has taken its bite. The day job gets the best hours. Other people's needs get the responsive hours. The bills get the responsible hours. The obligations get the non-negotiable hours. And the dream gets what's ever left when you're already half cooked. 10 minutes at night when you're already exhausted. A little attention between distractions, a little hope after the calendar has already chewed through everything else. And then we ask, why can't I stay consistent? Why do I keep drifting? Why does this feel so hard? But maybe the better question is, how can it feel strong if it never gets fed when you're strong? How can it feel real if it never gets protected like everything else that matters? How could it feel alive if it only gets visited when everything else is done with you? That's the tension. Not whether the dream matters. It may matter deeply. The question is whether your life is structured like it matters. And that one stings a little because it forces us to look at the difference between what we say we value and what we actually invest in our dreams. The cost of leftovers is not only that progress slows down. That part's obvious. If you give something 10 exhausted minutes here and 7 distracted minutes there, yeah, it's probably going to move very slowly. Put it on a coffee cup. The starving dream does not become a mighty oak by Friday. But the deeper cost is worse. Leftovers teach your nervous system that the dream is optional. Not because you want it to be optional or because you don't care, but because your life keeps treating it like it can always be bumped, moved, postponed, interrupted, sacrificed again and again and again. And over time, a dangerous story starts to form. If it really mattered to me, I would have made room by now. That's the false story. And that's where creative erosion gets quietly dangerous and specific. Because if it doesn't only wear down the work, it wears down your trust in your own dream. The dream keeps getting leftovers. Then it gets weak. Then it gets dusty on the shelf. And guilt and shame make it harder and harder to return to. So you blame yourself for not feeling the same fire that you used to. It's a deadly cycle. But fire needs fuel. And if the only fuel that you ever give your creative life is whatever drops off the back of the wagon after everybody else has eaten, don't be surprised when it doesn't burn like a bonfire. That isn't failure. It's starvation. Now, before we go any further, I want to get ahead of the crappy advice that usually pops up right about now. Somebody out there is going to say, just wake up at 4:30 in the morning and grind. Sir, madam, mysterious productivity guru with a staff of 6 people to help you live your dreams every day. Some of us have already been emotionally mugged by Tuesday. Some of us don't need a more aggressive alarm clock. Some of us need an honest look at what we're protecting. And what we're pretending will magically survive somehow without protection. This is not hustle culture with softer lighting. And just want it more is lazy advice wearing gym shoes and an obviously fake smile. This is about care. Because the wound may not be your fault, but the care still matters. And if your creative life matters, it deserves more than leftovers from the end of a day that already took your best hours. This is one of the practical faces of creative erosion. It's not always dramatic. It doesn't always look like quitting. Sometimes it looks like a slow scheduling lie. I'll get to it later. I'll start when things calm down. I'll make space right after this project. I'll come back when life is less busy. And sometimes that's true. There are seasons when life really is too much to do anything right now. There are seasons where survival gets the focus. Washing machines break down, toilets leak. The ER is a real thing. There are seasons where your assignment is not to build a new empire by Wednesday, The assignment is to breathe, to stabilize, and not turn the pain of feeling like you failed your dream into your identity. So I'm not saying every later is a lie, but sometimes later stops being a season and becomes a hiding place or even an excuse. Sometimes when things calm down becomes the phrase we use to avoid admitting we haven't protected what matters. Sometimes, not always, but sometimes, I don't have time really means I haven't given this a place. That's not said to shame you. It's said to bring truth into the room. Because you can't rebuild a creative life that only exists in emotional theory. At some point, what matters needs a place. A small place, a protected place, a realistic place, but a place. Because if the dream has no place to live, it'll keep gathering dust. And this is where the guilty voice usually shows up. What about work? Your family needs you. What about your responsibilities? What about the dirty dishes? Dirty dishes are always there. Something is always ready to eat up your time. But the point is not that nothing else matters. It does. Obviously, we want to spend time with our family. We need to take care of our real life. The point is that if everything else matters more, by default, your creative life will never get a fair turn. Protecting your creative life and the future you want to build isn't selfish or immature or irresponsible. Protecting your creative life is stewardship. It's self-care. It's responsibility towards something that's been entrusted to you. Because if you're a creative person, your creative life is not a Halloween costume that you drag out once a year and then wear on top of your real life. It's one of the ways that your life becomes real to you. So when you continually give your dreams only leftovers, you aren't just delaying a project. You're starving a part of yourself that helps you stay whole. And that matters. You don't need to protect it perfectly. You don't need to build a crocodile-filled moat around your calendar. For most of us, protection doesn't begin with a perfect system. It begins with one honest boundary, one protected hour, one reoccurring appointment with yourself, one small promise that you stop treating as optional. One place in the week that says, this matters enough to be here before everything else scrapes the plate clean. That's not selfish. Your creative life deserves this. Now, I know this one from the inside. For years, I told myself that my own creative work mattered. And it did. My music mattered. My writing mattered. Worthy Creative You and building this community mattered. The books mattered, the ideas mattered. But if you'd looked at my actual life, you would have seen something very uncomfortable and maybe familiar. The things that I said mattered were often living in the margins. They got the late night exhausted version of me, the after everything else version, the version of me that had already spent the best of my energy solving problems, running productions, answering needs, keeping things moving, and being responsible everywhere else. And then I'd sit down with the dream and wonder why it felt so hard to move. Which is a little like feeding a plant one ice cube every 9 days, keeping it in a cold, dark closet, and then asking why it has a really bad attitude and is turning brown on you. Of course it has an attitude. It's starving. And the brutal part is that I'd sometimes mistake that starvation for a verdict about myself. I'd think, maybe I'm not disciplined enough. Maybe I'm not serious enough. Maybe I missed my chance. Maybe this is just who I am now. But that wasn't the whole truth. The truth was that I hadn't given the dream a fair place to live or grow. I'd given it my leftover scraps of time and expected it to behave like it was being nourished with a full-time job. That's not how living things work. And creative dreams are living things. Not in a spooky kind of feed me Seymour kind of way, but some projects do start to make unreasonable demands. But in the sense that they need light, attention, air, contact, space to grow. Something more reliable than I'll get to you if there's nothing left at the end of the week. Because usually there's not. And I'm not pretending that I have this perfectly solved. I am better than I was. I'm more intentional than I was. But I still have weeks where the thing that I say matters gets shoved into the corner while the urgent stuff wears a little crown and demands all of my time and some snooty snacks. That's living in real life. The goal is not perfection. The goal is to stop pretending that the dream can survive indefinitely without being fed. So here's the waypoint. Give the dream a place to live. Not a fantasy palace, not a perfect studio, not a calendar that looks like it was designed by an optimistic robot with no children, no job, no bills, and apparently no need for sleep. But a place, a real place, a protected place, a place small enough to actually keep, and meaningful enough to actually matter. Because here's the truth. If your creative life only lives in your good intentions, it'll keep losing to interruptions. Good intentions say, I care about this. Protection says, I care enough to protect a space. And those are two very different things. And if you're trying to rebuild creative trust with yourself, that difference matters. Because self-trust doesn't rebuild from giant declarations and things that you hope to do. It rebuilds from kept promises, small ones, repeated ones, honest ones, the kind that teach your nervous system, when I say this matters, I mean it enough to keep showing up. That's how the thread becomes a strong rope, not through pressure, through protection. So here's the step. Choose one protected place for your creative life this week. Just one, not a full life overhaul, not 12 new habits, not a calendar ready design so elaborate that it requires a legend, a color code, and possibly a municipal permit. One protected place, one reasonable period of time during the week. And it has 3 requirements. First, it has to be specific. You can't do an I'll work on it sometime. Sometime is where dreams go to nap until 2086, and by 2086, either you or your dream will be 86th. Specific means Tuesdays from 7 to 7:30, Saturday morning after coffee, Wednesday at lunch, 20 minutes before the house wakes up on Tuesday, 45 minutes on Sunday before the week starts barking. And if you wonder if that really works, it's the thing that gives me room to produce this show. Second, it has to be protected. That means you decide ahead of time what will and won't be allowed to steal it. Not everything can be blocked. Life is life. But some things can. Scrolling can. Fake urgency can. Low value noise can. The 19th check of your email can. The urge to reorganize the entire garage before writing one sentence can absolutely take a seat. Protection means that you treat the time as belonging to the dream. Period. And when you can't, you have a backup time. And third, it has to be small enough to keep. Don't make the first protected place so heroically huge that life looks at it and says, oh yeah, that's adorable, we're not doing that. Start smaller, 30 minutes, 20 minutes, 10 minutes if that's what's realistic for you. The point is not to impress anyone. The point is to protect regular contact with your dream. Because contact is how creative trust rebuilds. So choose one protected place during your week. Then choose one action for that place. Write one page, edit one scene, play one song, sketch one idea. You won't finish the dream in a marathon day, but it's enough to prove that the dream has a place. Enough to start feeling a different story than if it really mattered to me, I would have made room by now. Because now you have. That's the move. Now, leftover moments are not bad. Sometimes a spare 10 minutes becomes a sentence. A small break can become a melody. A tired walk leads to the solution to something you couldn't solve at the desk. Use those moments. Catch the sparks when they show up. But leftovers can't be the entire diet for your dreams. There's a difference between using a leftover moment and making your entire creative life demand and depend on scraps. One is resourceful, the other is erosion. And sometimes I'm just being flexible is true. But sometimes flexibility becomes the noble costume worn by fear. Because if the dream only gets scraps, you never have to find out what would happen if you actually fed it. You never have to risk gaining momentum. You never have to risk being seen. You never have to admit how much it still matters to you. Sometimes leftovers are not just about being too busy to build your future. Sometimes leftovers are where we hide from the vulnerability of commitment. And I say that with care, not accusation. Because the wound may not be your fault, but the care still matters. And sooner or later, if the dream still matters, it needs more than emotional agreement. It needs a regular place in your life. Most dreams are about future you. But there can be no future unless you start in the present. And if this is where you are, if you're beginning to realize that your creative life still matters, but you aren't sure how to protect it inside an actual life, that's part of why I'm building the Deeper Worthy Path. Because I love this show. I believe in the show. But a video can only sit with you for so long. At some point, rebuilding usually needs more than I watched something that hit me right in the gut, nodded in agreement at the screen, and then went back to my normal Tuesday. I wish strong coffee and a good thought fixed everything. Truly, I was rooting for the coffee. But rebuilding usually needs structure, support, practice, honesty with yourself. A place where the work doesn't have to keep fighting for permission to exist. And if you're still trying to understand what creative erosion may have done in your life, the free guide, What Actually Happened to You, is a really good place to start. And if you're ready for the next layer, the Creative Erosion Self-Check is there to help you see where you're along your journey, what stage you may be in, and what kind of next step actually fits your life. No pressure, no shame, just a path when you're ready for one. So, no, your creative life can't survive forever on leftovers. Not because you're weak, not because you're lazy, not because the dream is too fragile, but because living things need care. They need light, contact, space, protection. Something more reliable than whatever's left after the rest of the world is finished with you for the day. And I'm not suggesting that you should abandon your responsibilities or drive your life recklessly off a cliff. What I'm saying is, if something still matters in your life, it needs a place. If something is still alive, it needs care. If something keeps calling to you, it may be time to stop treating it like an inconvenience and start treating it like part of your restoration. So choose one protected place, one small promise to yourself, one space in the week where the dream gets more than leftover scraps. That's how you begin protecting the thread, That's how your dreams get closer to reality. And next time we need to talk about what happens after you finally give the dream a place to live. Because there's a strange moment that comes after the first honest commitment. You protected the time, you took the step, your dream starts to show some signs of life. And then you look up and realize that the road is a lot longer than you hoped. The masterpiece is not done. The script is not ready to film. Your audience has not fully found you. The fruit is not growing on the trees you planted yet. And suddenly you realize that you're staring down a road that goes to the horizon, filled with nothing but empty desert and scorching blacktop stretching as far as you can see. And the billboard by the side of the road says, "Next gas 352 miles." And your fuel gauge, range 340. And if you thump the dashboard like the fuel gauge is holding back and lying about whether or not you have enough fuel to reach the end of the road, that's the long middle. And the long middle is where a lot of dreams run out of gas and die in the desert heat. And where a lot of creatives give up on their dreams, get scared, and turn around. So next time we're going to go down that road and talk about how to get through the long middle in your life. Because if the dream matters enough to protect and want, it also matters enough to sustain. And sometimes the next honest step is not turning around or giving up. It's learning how to keep driving when you aren't sure if you have enough gas in the tank. Thank you for spending this time with me. I know your time matters. I know that your energy matters. And I know that protecting a creative life inside an actual life isn't easy. It's not simple. It's not always clean. But if something in you is still reaching toward the work, if something in you still aches when your dream gets pushed aside, if some part of you still knows that your creative life matters, then maybe it deserves more than leftovers. Maybe it deserves a real place. In your real life, let it be imperfect, oddball, make no sense to anyone but you, but make it real. Your dream will never pay off unless you invest in it. So give it one protected place, one honest action, one kept promise to yourself. You deserve that. Because you are still worthy, still creative, still on your way to becoming who you always dreamed of becoming. Live creative, my friend.